This video is going to be a commentary piece about the Detroit Lions roster situation heading into the NFL Combine and then leading into free agency and the NFL Draft. Their roster needs appeared obvious at the end of the 2023 season. Although if you look at their list of free agents, the needs or the spaces to fill do appear kind of different, a little more widespread when you look at some of the guys that are free agents, Jackson, Glasgow, and others. But to only look at the roster through a 2023 seasonal lens, corner and outside linebacker D-end, obviously the most severe needs. That goes, unsaid. They're the most consistent positions that affected gameplay on the defensive side of the ball, at least in a negative manner. But also they're also give us an example of how the coaches used a comprehensive plan to win football games, particularly as the season progressed. And what I mean by that is the lack of depth there and injuries clearly caused a coaching adjustment at some point during the season. More on that later. I'll be a little more specific. A shift to a more aggressive, intentionally attacking style to try to get pressure and limit how long certain guys, certain DBs, had to cover, particularly the guys who were playing outside corner. Because for a really long stretch of the season, 6, 7, 8 weeks, besides Aiden Hutchinson trying to get home on a sack or pressuring the quarterback, no one else was really getting the job done. It was unsustainable. Aleem McNeil had a great season, don't get me wrong. I think 5+ sacks. But when they went to a heavier, blitzing, more unpredictable style, of course that did give up some big plays and a ton of passing yards. It was also part of the winning formula for them. Make some bigger plays, make enough stops, particularly early in games. If you look at the Chargers game as an example, you win the game 41-38, but I believe the Lions got stops on 3 of the first 4 possessions. And from there on out, the Chargers just shredded them, just scored quite easily in some cases. Point is, they were able to get some stops early, and the defense or the offense was able to close the show. Unfortunately, that dynamic didn't work when you got to the stretch of the Packers and the Bears losses. It was a rough stretch. Look, it ended up being a 2-2 stretch. You had to win over the Bears at home before Thanksgiving, and then the win on the road down in New Orleans. It could have been a 1-3. It really could have been 0-4, but certainly 1-3. They come back to win the Bears game in the fourth quarter, held on to beat the Saints 33-28 in a game that Derek Carr got hurt. Anyway, after that stretch is when the defense definitely took a more aggressive stance, switched to a more attacking style at times, and then occasionally dropped out in coverage when it's third and long. It's the tactically correct decision to do so. There was also some third and longs where they went cover 0, which I do not advocate them doing with the talent that they had in 2023. Beginning with that Week 15 win over the Broncos at home, if you look at what the defense did, gave up just over 21 points. I think it was 21.3 points per game in reaching the NFC title game over the next 6 games. The 2 positions of clear need associated with that strategic shift, if you ask me, was corner and outside linebacker, D-end, or edge rusher, if you will. When there's no pass rush, it's longer for the quarterback to survey the field and find someone to throw to. And then the overreaction to that, the other side of that coin, I guess, is the offense has a clear mismatch in their favor somewhere. CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. And then you have to bring 5 or 6 to create pressure on the quarterback. Well, that disparity in talent between a CeeDee Lamb and Jefferson and whoever's covering him, that disparity is increased in that situation because there's now larger areas of the field to throw the ball onto, and at times certainly offenses were able to do that against the Lions. Now those 2 descriptions are on some level oversimplifications, or maybe they're just extreme examples. But I do think that conscious decision made by the coaching staff somewhere around the Saints, Bears, Broncos series of games, it had an impact, but I think it tells you about what the Lions are going to do here in free agency and the draft. And look, it had an impact. It had an impact. Aiden Hutchinson had 9 sacks in his final 8 games of the year, beginning with 1 sack in Chicago on the road in the loss in Week 14. The previous 7 weeks, he had 1. I think Aiden Hutchinson's sack output is related to being a little bit more unpredictable with the pass rush, with the blitzes and the coverages. But the Lions want more options in 2000. Actually, they don't want more options in 2024. When I say more options, I don't mean more options than Aiden Hutchinson. I mean more options than relying on such an aggressive strategy defensively when you didn't have those coverage guys in the, and it worked, as I just explained. It worked from a points per game standpoint. But they can be better in 2024 with better cover guys and better pass rush guys on the other side from Aiden Hutchinson. But that's not how I mean more options. What I mean more options is better coverage on the back end because you have a more efficient and consistent pass rush. Improving those two elements, if you ask me, is what has to be done. And Brad Holmes is absolutely right with something he said at the Combine. I wasn't able to watch the complete 20 minutes, but I was able to watch snippets of it. And he's absolutely right that free agency is where you address certain needs, and the draft is where you acquire talent. I thought that was a really cool way to describe it. He said a couple of other things, mentioned his time with the Rams and being a guy who, I think he said, cross-check corners. With, to my knowledge, the way I interpreted that was someone else has already done the work on these 4 or 5 corners, and then it was his job to go back and check what those people did and then sign off on it like a plus or put an X next to it, meaning no, I don't co-sign this evaluation of this player compared to that player. That's how I took that statement. But in terms of acquiring talent in a draft, unbelievable opportunity, if you ask me, to improve the pass rush and the overall coverage talent with 4 of the top 100 picks. That's been well documented. Look, the Packers also have 5 of the top 100 picks. So you're really in a competition with the Packers to acquire the most talent there as compared to the Packers, because that's the team in the division that I think presents the biggest threat. I do think that it would be great if the Lions are able to address one of those positions before the draft. Create some overlap, some depth. And what I mean by that is double stack at certain positions, how they've done at running back, quarterback, if you will, with Hendon Hooker. And I know that there's people who, as I've gotten more Lions fans following me on Twitter and YouTube, obviously, I've been able to be exposed to more opinions of Hendon Hooker and Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. And it's kind of surprising because, of course, it worked out in the Lions' favor. It worked out. And creating that depth at quarterback, I think, was just brilliant. I get it when people say, well, you want as high-end talent as you can acquire on the cheapest salary, the rookie deals. And I get that. But being able to grab a guy like Hendon Hooker, I still think it was a brilliant move. Provide some security for them in the event that Jared Goff was to get injured, number one, or number two, perhaps not re-sign with the team. Look, they got crazy depth at inside linebacker. Even at safety, even if C.J. Gardner-Johnson doesn't return, they still have good depth there with Branch, Melifonwu, and Joseph. Those are 3 young and talented guys. I know Joseph's contract will be up sooner than Branch and Melifonwu. I like the stacking of talent at certain positions. They just have not done that at corner. That's obvious. At this point, with the free agents that are out there, and there's some really good ones. I mean, I happen to be a big fan of Awuzie, the corner from the Bengals, who's coming off an injury, so not sure that he'll return to the level of play that is in my mind prior to his ACL injury, which I think was 2022. There's a lot of talk about Stephon Gilmore, who's like 32, 33 years old. I still thought he played extremely well for the Cowboys this past year, but I haven't watched the film to the extent, obviously, that I've watched Ravens and Lions film. Some of the other guys that are out there, to me, are outside the realm of what Brad Holmes would try to go do, particularly with how things worked out with Mosley. Unfortunate for that guy that he suffered so many injuries. Kendall Fuller from Washington is definitely a guy that I think is in play for them, depending on the salary structure that guy's looking for. Other players like Snead and maybe even Jalen Johnson from the Bears, I think are probably going to be price themselves out of Detroit, even though the Lions have certainly more cap space than my Ravens do available as it stands right now. I don't think I really want to comment on the edge position talent that's out there in the free agency, because some of those guys, Brian Burns, others, way too high a salary structure to either trade for and or try to sign in free agency. In my opinion, I think they need to address one of those spots. If you address one of them, then the mentality that Brad Holmes described at the combine, meaning acquire the highest level talent that you can in the draft and use free agency to address needs. If he does that, addressing one of those needs, then you can follow through with the second part of that statement in the draft. Best player available, I guess, is a simple way to say it. And they certainly did that last year. There's a lot of people who said, they should have drafted corner, but now they have other issues to address because of their own free agents with Glasgow and Jackson on the offensive line. And I actually think Brock Wright is a really underrated player and for the Lions or anyone. I think he broke a forearm or elbow or something like that. I have to tell you that the Lions Discord that I was able to create in the last 6 or 8 months really been helpful for me as a content creator because I just do not have time. I wish I did to keep up with even Baltimore area media. During some of my car rides, I'll flip on Baltimore area radio and listen to that where I can stand it, I should say. But in terms of free agency and the draft, that's about all I get. I don't watch TV, certainly don't watch ESPN, and those guys in my Lions Discord, I have to give them a shout out. They've done a great job about sharing links and information to help me stay somewhat informed of what Detroit media is saying, Lions area media is saying. I'm just not informed of those conversations that occur on a daily basis, and some of that is intentional and some of that is just time constraints. Look, losing the 3 corners that they are going to lose in free agency, Jacobs, I think Vildor, and Mosley, who of course has suffered 2 catastrophic injuries in a row. Hopefully he's able to recover somewhere. Certainly doesn't sound like it'll be in Detroit. That creates an exponential need in terms of addressing corner. I think you're looking at 2 picks in the draft at corner, or a free agent signing and 1 pick, if not 2, in the draft. I don't know if you have the same thought about corner, but I think the level of talent there has got to be double stacked, maybe even triple stacked. Mostly, I'm about the film here, and I will be straight up with you. I don't put college film on my YouTube channel for a couple of reasons. If you want me to describe to you what it is, ask me in the comment section. So mostly for me, I've been tracking Big Ten guys film-wise, and for me, in that area, Sane Riestel from Michigan, Cooper DeJean, Cam Hart, who's Notre Dame and obviously not Big Ten, but that area, and then Kyrie Jackson from Oregon. Those are the 4 guys that I have focused on so far at corner, and I think they can all play. I think they can all help this Lions team. I understand that there'll be drastically different opinions about some of them. Look, I tracked Hart and Jackson throughout college because they're from Maryland, so I have some knowledge of them. Hart played at an extremely high-level private school program, Good Counsel, and Jackson played at a public school in PG County, which is one of the most talented places in the country as far as athletic talent. I think the Lions will have their choice of a really good player at corner in the first round. But the outside linebacker DNs there might be very gifted as well. As I work through the corners on my Patreon and Twitter stuff, like I said, I don't put college film on YouTube. I'll have more pre-draft commentary on prospect videos, like this one, commentary videos, I should say, on prospects, just so you know. I really do like Sane Riestel. I'm just not sure he's the guy at pick 29 for the Lions, and here's what I mean by that. There may be just more purely talented players, regardless of position, there at that time. And I'm using Sane Riestel as an example because I really like the player. He will not be on the board at 61. That's the conflict. If you ask me, he's the player who illustrates the conflict very quickly. I believe Holmes is actually the guy who came out and said the Michigan players, you get what you think you're going to get. And Sane Riestel will be an example of that. My thing with him is, he's played a lot of slot, corner, nickel, and you have a great nickel defender there in Brian Branch. Sane Riestel gives you a little bit more coverage options because he's a much better man defender than Brian Branch is, if you ask me, for some of the smaller slot defenders that you'll see. When you talk about the turnaround from pick 29 to pick 61, it's a long way. And if you acquire talent at a specific position prior to the draft, if you address a need, then you can do what you want at pick 29. And in my opinion, having pick 73, 12 selections later than 61, tells you that 29 is one where they're going to get the best player available. Not necessarily another running back or another inside linebacker or another safety, because I wouldn't advocate for that. Having those 2 picks together in quick succession, I think offers the front office a great opportunity to address multiple positions at 61 and 73, regardless of what they do at 29, if they're able to address one of the positions prior to the draft. If you, in free agency, if it's a guy like Fuller, the corner from Washington, or I know that it's probably difficult to imagine a Woozy being a guy who addresses the Lions' needs because he doesn't have the name that he had prior to his injury in 2022. I have no idea if the dude will return to that status. There's other guys out there. Sean Murphy-Bunting from the Titans. Xavier Howard, to me, is a guy who's a little bit too old and seems like his best years are behind him. Steven Nelson, really underrated corner from the Texans. I don't think he has the reputation for being a great coverage guy, but man, I covered a lot of Texans film this year. He's a player that has got way more playmaking ability than people give him credit. He had a pick 6 in the playoffs, by the way. In any case, maybe your perspective is different on 29 than mine is. If you address one position, outside linebacker or corner, in free agency, then 29 I think can be where you go get the best talent that's available. And knowing that you have 61 and 73 stacked together later, and there's certainly really good talent at wide receiver, corner, even offensive line in this draft. I use the St. Reestel example because he's really good. He did play more nickel than I thought. The 3 games I focused on for him and Michigan was Alabama, Washington, and Ohio State. The best 3 teams that Michigan played. I guess I could have used other players, but here's where I go with this. I don't think that Latu will be available at 29. He should be long gone before then. To me, he's a top 12, top 15 pick. But what if he's available at 29? Well, for the Lions, he fits their needs. For other teams, he would not. But because of his injury history, is it possible that he falls to 16, 18, 20? Yeah, I don't see him falling to actual 29. So it's an extreme example there. In my opinion, the Lions can put themselves in great position to improve needs and the overall talent level, the ceiling of the roster, by getting something done in free agency at one of those 2 positions, outside linebacker or corner, that was the most clear need in the regular season, and in my opinion was the talent, the lack of depth and the lack of overall talent at those 2 positions caused or required the strategic change or shift near the end of the regular season. Again, that Week 15 game against the Broncos, I think you saw it because you saw it in the way that Ifeatu Melifonwu was inserted into the lineup and how he was used as a blitzer to make the defense more multiple, a little more unpredictable, which I thought even in the Ravens Week 7 win over the Lions, I thought it was obvious that the Lions were a little too vanilla on defense, a little too reliant on Aiden Hutchinson and a 4-man rush. And when Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell made the strategic choice to go to more aggressive stance, more unpredictability, I think it produced results. Even though they gave up big plays, a lot of big passing yards, clearly. 21 points per game with this offense will get the job done. And I think they can even be better than 21 points per game in 2024 if they address those 2 positions heavily, particularly corner. The coverage element for the Lions was something that everyone knows was an issue and seems to be the most glaring need that they have, along with pass rush on the opposite side from Aiden Hutchinson. You guys let me know if you enjoy commentary-style videos. Forgive me for not showing film here. I do have the second part of my Lions offense film study come out, hopefully Saturday morning for you guys. It'll focus on their use of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. Brock Wright's a part of that. I know he's a free agent. I would really strongly urge the Lions to look to bring that guy back. Thought he was productive, a guy who, if and when Sam Laporta is either off the field for 1 play or 2, or he was injured, that Brock Wright can fill in the 12 personnel groupings, even 13 personnel groups with those 2 and Mitchell, I thought was productive for the Lions, particularly when they spread people out with those guys on the field and attack base defenses for the other team. So that'll be hopefully coming out Saturday morning for you guys. If you don't enjoy the commentary videos, please let me know. I love to cover the draft stuff, and I will have some projection videos to complete or conduct as we get closer to the draft. It'll typically be, hey, how happy would you be if this is what occurs in the first 2, or maybe in the case of the Lions, 3 rounds? Because having 4 of the top 100 picks is notable, if you ask me. Again, I referenced the Packers having 5 of the top 100 picks. I think you've got to stay ahead of them or even outpace them in terms of the talent that's acquired. so that you can hopefully sweep them in 2024 instead of split. Appreciate you guys' time. If you think other Lions fans would enjoy this commentary style video, please consider grabbing a link to it and sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.